It's Wednesday, January 11. In the headlines locally, Tourism Minister Ed Bartlett confirms that the nation has logged an over 400% increase in growth in that sector over last year. In business news, Novamed rebrands Knutsford Court Hotel. Regionally, CARICOM responds to invitation to mount election observation mission there. Internationally, we shouldn't underestimate Russia, NATO Stoltenberg advises. And in sports, in football news, can Liverpool afford Jude Bellingham? This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I'm Brittany Clark. Minister of Tourism Edmund Bartlett on Tuesday confirmed during the sitting of the House of Representatives that the Jamaica tourism sector has logged an over 400% level of growth over the same period last year. He made his remarks in the House while addressing the issue of recession that has been looming over the globe since late last year. According to the minister, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, indicated that 1/3 of the countries in the world are likely to go into a deep recession as 2023 rolls out, with the backlash of COVID-19 as well as the Russia-Ukraine war playing a heavy role in this development. However, according to Minister Bartlett, the World Bank has recently released information that indicates this recession may be averted. In fact, Minister Bartlett said the World Bank indicated further that there may even be a 0.5% growth in the main markets. Against this background, the tourism minister had this to say.
One of the things that I wanted to assure, not just this honorable House, but the nation, is that the stewardship of tourism in Jamaica is focused and committed to ensure that notwithstanding the ominous clouds that may be hovering, we are focused on growth and we will continue to grow the industry. And we have had growth even in difficult times, because if you recall, the recession of 2008 to 10, which was recorded as the worst recession that the world had seen in 80 years, that we were able to grow tourism 3% every year during the recession, and the economy of Jamaica stayed steady, and we didn't lose a single financial institution during that recession. And the winter season so far, Madam Speaker, has started, and we use the term with a bang. And what a bang it is. Because the January figures to date is showing a 463% increase over last year. 463% increase over last year. And a 29% increase over 2019. We ended the year equaling the record-breaking earnings of tourism of $3.64 billion.
Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, says that the emergency regulations governing the states of public emergency, SOE, announced on December 28, 2022 in 8 parishes became effective once declared. She was speaking in the Upper House on Friday, January 6, where the regulations were tabled. Prime Minister Andrew Holness announced SOEs for the parishes of St. Anne, Clarendon, St. Catherine, Kingston, St. Andrew, St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover to curtail increased criminal activities in those areas and bolster public safety. Senator Johnson-Smith, who is leader of government business, clarified reports that the regulations were to be debated or approved in the Upper House on January 6. Leader of government business, Kamina Johnson-Smith.
I note that there had been some media reports which I saw both in the written, I saw in the written press and heard on the radio this morning, where it was being stated that the regulations were to be debated or approved today, and that I even heard it being discussed about extensions being debated today. I just wanted to make it clear, Mr. President, that the only action intended today, as has been our process, it was the tabling of the regulation. So we have not changed the agenda today. This had always been the intention. as is a part of the process. The regulations are effective once they are made, they are gazetted, they are dated as provided. The tabling here is a matter of the process, which we have continued to follow.
The Education and Youth Ministry is placing focus on expanding the tertiary education sector with options for students to access financing. Portfolio Minister Favour Williams told the JIS News that the objective is to ensure that a higher percentage of our population is educated at higher levels. She said statistics indicate that enrollment of students in tertiary institutions remain low relative to those who graduate from secondary school. The minister indicated that the government knows that the limiting factor is generally financing, so the government of Jamaica has earnestly worked all during last year to look at a higher education policy and look at what kind of ideas can come forward on financing. Maya Chung has more.
Minister Williams was speaking to JIS News after addressing an interfaith convocation service at the University Chapel in St. Andrew to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the University of the West Indies, UWI. Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of UWI Mona, Professor Dale Weber, said the university, across its 5 campuses, is working to introduce shorter course options that will cater to students who have to work while pursuing tertiary studies. Professor Weber said that the 75th anniversary provides an opportunity to further grow the institution. University Registrar and Chief Administrative Officer Dr. Marie Smith informed that several activities are slated to take place in each region to celebrate the institution's 75th anniversary. Planned are academic conferences, lectures, parties, galas, talent shows, and features to celebrate members of staff who have been working across universities. A full list of activities to mark the anniversary milestone can be found on the university's website at www.mona.uwi.edu. For PBCJ News, I am Maya Chung.
It's time now for the business report with Danita Rodney.
Novamed, the new owners of Nutsworth Court Hotel in New Kingston, have renamed the property Summit. The new name of the soon-to-be Smart Business Campus was revealed on the heels of the completion of the $40 million deal, which was announced in July 2022. According to reports, the Summit House will be a hub where businesses and consumers connect to fuel solutions which drive economic growth. Now for your market updates. In foreign exchange trading for Tuesday, January 10, the US dollar sold for an average of $153.77. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $112.92. The pound sterling traded for $186, and the euro sold for $166.79. In GSE trading, the GSE index advanced by 417 points. The junior market index advanced by 56 points. The combined market index advanced by 905 points, and the All Jamaican Composite Index advanced by 397 points. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 110 stocks, of which 53 advanced, 43 declined, and 14 traded firm. Advancing were 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited Verbal Preference, Berger Paints Jamaica Limited, and Caribbean Cement Company Limited. Declining 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, Access Financial Services Limited, and Barita Investments Limited. Trading firm AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited, CAC 2000 Limited, and Edufocal Limited. The overall volume leaders were Wigton Wind Farm Limited Ordinary Shares with over 3 million units, MFS Capital Partners Limited, and Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial with over 2 million units. In regional stocks, on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, Calypso Macro Index Fund was the only active security, posting a volume of 183 shares. On the Barbados Stock Exchange, Goddard Enterprises Limited was the sole security, trading 834 shares. In regional business, Trinidad and Tobago continues to strengthen its relationship with China. The second China TNT Investment Corporation was held on Monday, and the focus of this investment is on agriculture and agro-processing. Mahalia Joseph Wharton has more.
Minister of Trade and Industry Paula Gopi-Skoon said there's no doubt that foreign direct investment remains a major catalyst for development and integration of countries in the global economy, and China continues to be a significant partner for the region.
Notwithstanding this period of unprecedented global disruption, this particular forum is a declaration of the strong relationship between our two countries and the many possibilities that lie ahead in terms of trade, business, and investment and economic cooperation. Trinidad and Tobago remains a place of certainty and continues to be an attractive location for foreign investment from China and elsewhere.
Ambassador of the People's Republic of China Fang Chu is confident that both countries can open a new chapter of mutually beneficial cooperations. He said the first investment cooperation forum, initiated in September 2021, was aimed at enhancing the synergy of development strategies of both countries.
This year, we bring our focus on agriculture, agro-processing, cross-border e-commerce, and modern logistics, with the belief that discussion on investment and cooperation in these fields is what we need, while Trinidad and Tobago is at full speed on its drive for economic diversification and industrial upgrading.
A major component of the second China TNT Investment Corporation was the signing of a cooperation framework agreement between Oriental International Business Holding Company Limited and First Caribbean Marketing Company Limited, FCMC. Mahalia Joseph Wharton, TTT News.
In international business, another round of layoff is in full effect as Bed Bath & Beyond said it will lay off more employees to trim costs. More from the Reuters report.
Just a week after announcing it was exploring options including bankruptcy, Bed Bath & Beyond on Tuesday said it would lay off more employees in an attempt to reduce costs as it fights to stay in business. Without revealing the magnitude of the new layoffs, the home goods retailer said in a statement, quote, "As our strategic direction changes and we streamline our operations, it is necessary to right-size our organization to ensure we are equipped for the future." Last year, company executives said its corporate and supply chain workforce would be slashed by about 20%.
In market data for oil prices were steady as market participants were pulled in different directions by an unexpected build in U.S. crude and fuel inventories. Brent crude was up 43 cents at $80.53, and West Texas Intermediate crude rose 25 cents to $75.37 a barrel. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Danita Rodney.
In regional news, the Caribbean community, CARICOM, has responded to the invitation extended by the government of Antigua and Barbuda to mount a CARICOM Election Observation Mission, CEOM, to observe the general elections scheduled for January 18, 2023. The CARICOM Secretary General has appointed Ms. Josephine Tamai, Chief Elections Officer of the Elections and Boundaries Department of Belize, to head the CARICOM mission. Ms. Tamai has previously served as Chief of Mission for General Elections held in Jamaica in 2016, the Bahamas in 2017, and Dominica in 2019, and Deputy Chief of Mission for Elections in Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago in 2015. The CARICOM Election Observation Mission proposes to meet with leaders of political parties, the electoral officials, and other stakeholders of Antigua and Barbuda, and will monitor the voting process during the opening of the poll, the casting of votes, the closing of the poll, and the counting of ballots. The team will arrive in Antigua and Barbuda on the 11th and 15th of January 2023 and will depart on January 20th, 2023. From Trinidad and Tobago, Karma Bala tells us more about the effects of workplace bullying, and we also get some tips on how to address this issue and the associated mental stress.
Bullying manifests itself in all forms and is not confined to the schoolyard. In workspaces, many people encounter situations where they are faced with an aggressive co-worker or verbal criticism, personal attacks, humiliation, belittlement, and exclusion. Clinical and organizational psychologist Kelly McFarland says if left unchecked, this could have a psychological effect. It can also damage workplace productivity and performance. She believes it is important to tackle the issue head on.
A nice first step is to talk to the individual that is bullying you. A lot of times, or sometimes, the person does not recognize how their behavior is affecting you. If that doesn't work, look at your organization's policy. Lots of organizations have policies against bullying, and specifically, you want to see what the organization constitutes as bullying within their policies and what the steps to dealing with it are. As a very last resort, if all else fails, you can take legal action, you can engage an attorney.
Workplace bullying is not always openly hostile, but it can cause high blood pressure, mood and appetite changes, panic attacks, low self-esteem, headaches, and ulcers. Family members may not be able to empathize with those experiencing these issues, especially if the bullying is subtle. Many times, those at home become the victim of the suppressed rage of the victim connected to this workplace bullying. A tense home situation can lead to more stress, which creates a vicious downward spiral.
I think the first thing to dealing with that is recognizing that it happens, deciding that you want it to change. I always talk about making a decision, deciding that you don't want to do this to your family anymore, or to your friends, or to yourself. So then you want to find ways to sort of calm yourself, bring yourself as close to your baseline as possible, or at very least sort of explain to your loved ones, hey, this is, I've had a rough day, this is how I feel, I might need a few minutes to kind of calm down.
The organizational psychologist says seeking help to treat with the mental health concerns attached to workplace bullying is a must. Some self-help techniques include setting boundaries, making it clear to everyone what sort of behavior you are willing to accept, calmly speaking to the abuser, letting them know that the behavior is unacceptable, keeping track of the abuse, and speaking to management or human resources about the issue. Take the steps necessary to tackle workplace bullying before it impacts your mental health.
On January 10, the Bahamas celebrated Majority Rule Day. Kendon O'Neill gives us a recap of the significant events leading up to and emanating from that day that are constant reminders of Bahamian values.
Historians say in many ways it was the Burma Road riots of June 1st, 1942 that started the move towards majority rule. Agitated laborers turned to violent protests, pushing for equal pay regardless of color or nationality. It started at the site we know today as Lynden Pindling International Airport. The next big event was the general strike of January 1958. The 16-day-long strike shut down the city with widespread participation from almost every worker. From this came the Trade Union and Industrial Conciliation Act and the establishment of the Labor Department. Those strikes also fueled the suffrage movement. In 1957, Mary Ingram led a group of women in protest for the right to vote. The movement formed alliances across the political divide. By 1961, legislation was passed enabling women to vote. It took effect June 30th, 1962. 5 months later, women voted for the first time on November 26th that year. As the winds of social change swept through, political changes happened in tandem. In 1953, the Progressive Liberal Party was formed on the foundation of an earlier movement. 12 years later, on April 27, 1965, history made once again as the father of our nation, Lynden Pindling, threw the Speaker's mace outside a House of Assembly window, protesting unfair revisions to constituency boundaries proposed by the then governing UBP. These events paving the way to majority rule. It was the culmination of decades of struggle by freedom fighters. In a hard-fought election on January 10, 1967, the PLP won 18 of the 38 contested seats. Both Labour Party candidate Randall Fox and independent candidate Alvin Brannan supported the PLP to form the first cabinet of Premier Lynden Pindling, ushering in majority rule. Reporting for our news, I'm Kendino Knowles.
Healthcare is one of the 6 pillars outlined in Grenada's 2023 budget presentation. Speaking on GBN's Beyond the Headlines, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell noted that to have a successful nation, its people must first be healthy, physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Healthcare is an industry that Grenada is well poised to capitalize on if done properly to generate significant economic benefits and economic transformation. That's according to Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell, who was the guest on GBN's first Beyond the Headlines program for 2023. The aim is to make Grenada the healthcare capital of the OECS. The long-term goal is to get citizens to want to come to Grenada for healthcare rather than, as it now stands, citizens traveling to other countries for healthcare.
An indictment on our past leadership. St. George's University has grown over the last 40 years. Our national healthcare should have been growing simultaneously with that.
In international news, global shares eased on Tuesday as investors took profit on the gains from the past 2 weeks after comments from two Federal Reserve officials injected a note of caution over the U.S. rate outlook, knocking equities, commodities, and other risk assets. The MSCI All-World Index eased by 0.1% but remained in sight of Monday's 3-week high, while the dollar, a gauge of investor risk appetite, held steady against a basket of major currencies. In the past 6 weeks, even as cases have surged around the country, China has dismantled its zero-COVID policy, which has given markets a bumpy ride as investors have weighed up the economic benefits of reopening against the impact to activity from the wave of infections. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said it would be dangerous to underestimate Russia and President Vladimir Putin's ambition amid the war in Ukraine. The Secretary General says Russia has shown a great willingness to tolerate losses and suffering, Stoltenberg told a business conference in Norway. We have more developments in this next report.
The aim is, of course, to ensure that we can continue and also strengthen our support to Ukraine, because we have seen that Russia has suffered big losses in Ukraine due to the brave Ukrainian soldiers and the professionalism and the dedication of the Ukrainian armed forces, but we should not underestimate Russia. They are mobilizing more troops. They are working hard to acquire more equipment, more ammunition, and they have shown a willingness to actually suffer but continue the war. And there is no indication that President Putin has changed the overall aim of his brutal war against Ukraine. So we need to be prepared for the long haul.
Start with Financial Times.
Henry Foy, Financial Times. A question for President Michel. In October 2021.
The European Union will keep doing everything in its power to support the brave people of Ukraine. We will keep the pressure on the Kremlin for as long as it takes with a biting sanctions regime. We will extend these sanctions to those who militarily support Russia's war, such as Belarus or Iran. And we will be coming forward with new sanctions on Belarus, answering their Belarus role in this Russian war in Ukraine.
Very much to both organizations, both to EU and NATO, for practical.
I have said many times since the beginning of Russia's invasion in Ukraine that I think that Ukraine should get all the necessary military equipment they need and they can handle to defend their homeland. And this means, of course, advanced air defense systems, but also other types of advanced military equipment, as long as it is necessary to defend Ukraine, because they also defend the basic principles of the UN Charter, of the fundamental rights, and of the international law.
Atlantic security. It also recognizes the value, and I welcome the new announcements just over the last days by the United States, Germany, France, to also provide new types of armored vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, and other types of armor to Ukraine. And 2018. I welcome the focus on systems, but I think we need to also realise that this is not only about adding more systems, more platforms, more weapons, but also ensuring that the platforms, the weapons we have already provided are working as they should.
Together, the EU and its member states, Russia's war against Ukraine has had two unintended consequences. It has strengthened both our organisations, the EU and NATO, and it has brought us closer together.
To address in particular the growing geostrategic competition, we are determined to take the partnership between NATO and the European Union to the next level. To address in particular the growing geostrategic competition, resilience issues, and the protection of critical infrastructures.
In sports today, despite FIFA World Cup coming to a close, football news, developments and excitement has not died down. As the globe's football clubs look to grab the best players into their respective teams, the debate is now on. Can Liverpool afford to acquire midfielder Jude Bellingham? Jude Bellingham has been making waves in the sport from an early age. Bellingham made his England under-15 debut against Turkey in December 2016. In recognition of his captaining the team during that 2017-18 season, he was presented with a Special Achievement Award at the 2018 Birmingham City Academy Awards night. Sky Sports has more.
We know that Liverpool need a midfielder, maybe they need a couple. He said he doesn't think that they're going to do that in this window. Are you in agreement?
I mean, Liam's clearly a frugal guy. He wants to save his cash for Jude Bellingham. I personally don't, I hate to say this for Liverpool fans, but I don't feel like Jude Bellingham will come to Liverpool, mainly because of the amount of money it's going to cost. And also Liverpool genuinely need two midfielders, not just one. As you've obviously got Henderson, who's now 31, I think. You've got Milner. Fabinho's not really looked himself for a little while. There's just, you've got Thiago, you've got Arthur's going back. There's just not enough midfielders that are there for the long run. I do feel Liverpool need a midfielder right now, but if you cast your mind back to when Liverpool were in a top four race when they had a lot of centre-back injuries, Klopp said we're not signing a centre-back and then managed to squeeze into the top four. That makes me fear that he's going to say, we need a midfielder, but I can probably graft our way to finishing in the top four, and I think Liverpool fans probably don't want me to say that, but
like Liam said, they're not going to panic buy, are they?
But in this situation, I think if they're waiting for Caicedo, for example, in the summer he's going to cost more. If you're saving up just for Bellingham and you need two midfielders, by the next window you'll need three. So you can't just save for one midfielder in this case.
But surely you've got to look at where they are in the table, you've got to look at the fact that they're sixth, and you've got to look at the competition around them as well and what their expectations are for this season. They've got to bring somebody in, surely. Before the end of this window, they've got to shore up that midfield and make sure that they've got enough, and that strength in depth. It's a phrase I always come back to, because the teams around them, whoever you are, your competitors, they've always got strength that they can bring on, and it feels like Liverpool, they're so far off Manchester City this season, they're so far off Arsenal this season as well, and it just feels like, what are Liverpool's expectations? Champions League minimum, surely. They want to be competing for the Premier League, we know that, but this season they'll be looking to get into the Champions League. If they fail to do that, and that's because they didn't bring anybody in midfield during the January transfer window right now, that's going to be a huge issue, and that's going to have knock-on effects for them.
Would you argue that Liverpool's transfer policy so far has been so flawless that they wait for the right player to come into the market? I think part of the reason they bought Cody Gakpo is because they thought he's available, he's young, he's another forward, we can bring him in on a relatively cheap deal. I don't feel like there's a midfielder on the market that Liverpool are willing to pay for.
It's a smart.
Yeah, although I do feel in this situation, I kind of agree with you where I go, if you finish 7th this season or 6th or 5th and you don't get in the Champions League, then Jude Bellingham's definitely not coming to Liverpool. So you have to fight. If you have to pay 10 million extra for Moses Caicedo or whoever you're after, now is the time to pay it so that you can make the top four.
It affects next season as well. If you don't get the Champions League and you go to buy that big midfielder in the summer, your finances are affected. If you're not in the Champions League, you can't compete with the teams that have qualified because they've got that windfall coming in. So it's a huge January for Liverpool. I personally don't think they'll bring a central midfielder in, but they would no way have expected to be this far off the top four at this stage of the season, and that's a concern.
That's news on PBCJ. I'm Brittany Clark. You can follow us on our social media platforms at PBC Jamaica.